Adderall. This is a stimulant that can enhance focus, energy, alertness, and attention. Prescribed primarily in the United States, Canada, and other British colonies and a few other countries, Adderall works by stimulating dopamine release, making one feel good, and also by boosting norepinephrine, which helps one feel attuned and focused, because the nervous system basically is simulated into survival mode. It also increases serotonin, and that just flat out feels good. It's pretty neat how that works. You probably already know about Adderall and what it does. In this video, I'm going to talk about Adderall's history. I've made many short videos about this.
The Internet Controlled Substance Act passed.
The terrible YouTube video. We're going to get into the history of Adderall. Adderall. And I covered it in the first person as Adderall in chapter 5 of my book, Hocus Focus. This is not a completely comprehensive history. That would take a whole book to cover. And if you want more details, I highly recommend Nicholas Rasmussen's book, On Speed. My name is Russell. RL are my initials, and I started taking amphetamines when I was 7 years old. Wait, you said this video was about Adderall, not amphetamines. Adderall is amphetamines. I stopped taking amphetamines about 12 years ago, and I like to make critical videos about ADHD and its medications as they relate to ourselves and our culture. So subscribe if you're into that sort of thing or whatever else. Nobody does it like we do here. And at the end of the video, I'll tell you how you can read my Adderall memoir for free. The whole Pandora's box of psychiatric pharmaceutical solution ideology paradigm really started with the amphetamines. It's the seed that branched out into the psychiatric medication tree that we all climb today. Adderall is not crystal meth. This is a common misconception. However, Adderall is crystal meth's cousin. Meth is short for methamphetamine, and Adderall is a combination of 4 different amphetamine, dexamphetamine salts. The difference between amphetamines and methamphetamine is the presence of a methyl group on the nitrogen atom in methamphetamine. This methyl group increases the drug lipophilicity, allowing it to cross the blood-brain barrier more easily and produce a more intense and longer-lasting stimulant effect. Amphetamine is a molecule with many names, and it's been rebranded and marketed and synthesized with variation and patented and acquired and regulated and reassigned to various conditions over the period of almost a century. And amphetamine does not exist in nature. The closest thing in nature to something like an Adderall is a traditional medicine from East Africa and the Middle East called Khat. Khat has an alkaloid called cathinone, which apparently alleviates depression, fatigue, obesity, stomach ulcers, and male infertility. There is very little information out there about it, and it appears to be popular in Yemen and Ethiopia. The other day I asked an Ethiopian woman who worked at the hardware store in a brazen breaking of the customer-employee etiquette, and she told me that the people back home who chewed it were degenerates who didn't work and got high all day, and she never tried it. And she told me about her favorite brand of teff powder to make injera bread. It doesn't appear anyone has really considered this plant for ADHD, but it does seem to present a viable solution that's from the natural world. But that's a whole other can of worms that exists in a parallel dimension in a different ballgame, and I don't think I'm prepared to go all Hamilton Morris and go to Yemen or Ethiopia right now to chew leaves. For me, I handle my ADHD with exercise, coffee, and willpower. Anyways, up until a certain amount of time, about 100 years ago, there were no man-made pharmaceutical drugs, really. Most, if not all, medicine was plant medicine, and some were also taken from animals. Medicine was in the food. Have you ever considered why tea and spices were such a big deal before the invention of modern medicine? It was more than bland food and tea times. Those were the medicines. Caffeine and L-theanine are being realized to alleviate ADHD symptoms now. Caffeine is a stimulant found in coffee and tea that works by blocking the action of adenosine, a chemical that makes us feel tired, and increasing the activity of dopamine and norepinephrine, while L-theanine is an amino acid found in green tea that can promote relaxation, reduce stress, and improve focus. So in a way, you could say tea was like the first Adderall, and an Adderall is just a cup of strong tea. And sometimes I think about how without the structure and demands of the lingering Industrial Revolution, there would be less expectation of all of us creating a rift in capacity called attention deficit disorder. Is there a crisis of ADHD without such a demanding existence, you know? The demands of this life are insane. But anyways, the stakes are high just to exist in the space and time and history that we live in right now. And throughout my entire tenure as a daily amphetamine user, I regularly said to myself, unnatural substance for an unnatural world. And I wasn't totally wrong for this justification. Stop autobiographing. Amphetamines. The first of a generation of medicines developed through scientific research managed by drug companies. Prior to this endeavor, a pharmaceutical company hadn't ever really partnered with university chemists to make patentable drugs for mass distribution and consumption. The creative of amphetamine ushered in a wedding between academia and the drug industry that remains complicated and financial. Some could argue, based on certain metrics, amphetamine is the most successful pharmaceutical of all time. In 1887, Romanian university student Lazar Edelanu was studying for his future of inventing the modern process for refining crude oil. It's a huge deal. Industrial Revolution all-star for sure. He found the amphetamine molecule basically in passing as he was in university and labeled it useless. He didn't take it. 30-some-odd years later, there was an apparent rise in asthma in the 1920s in the United States. Could it have been the newfound prevalence of the automobile? Could it have been the cigarette smoke everyone was inhaling inside? Could it have been the coal stoves? Could it have been the overcorrection of hygiene erasing natural biomes meant to protect us? Either way, something was happening with the sale of ephedrine that was being manufactured by Eli Lilly. Asthmatics and their parents were clearing apothecary shelves to clear their bronchial airways. A little company called SmithKline French, currently GSK GlaxoSmithKline, took notice of this. There was a shift happening where plants were being replaced with patentable industrial products. Essentially, all this focus on science and marketing quietly escorted plant medicines out of the picture into the fringe, where they remain to this day. A chemist in Los Angeles, Gordon Alls, had been tinkering with molecules in his laboratory in UCLA and found something kinda neat. He found beta-phenyl isopropylamine, or as I'm sure you're guessing right now is obviously amphetamine. He synthesized our first psychoactive drug in 1929, and after testing it on actual guinea pigs, a colleague of Al's turned him into a guinea pig and ingested 50 milligrams of amphetamine into his bloodstream. Researchers used to do that, which is kind of cool. They used to get into their work like that. They used to say, what am I giving to people? Let me give it to myself. The first case of a guy on Adderall was its daddy, Gordon Alls. Of course, it wasn't Adderall. It was just raw amphetamine. This man opened that psychiatric Pandora's box and in himself flipped a switch on of a feeling that's being experienced right now by like 42 million people who are experiencing Adderall in their system. It started that one fateful day, June 3rd, 1929. A molecular shift on the human brain and consciousness that is still lingering in the collective of all of us, and it is adjusting our expectations of productivity and is subtly adjusting our collective personality as a whole. From this first afternoon and evening on amphetamines, Alls left us with a singular document that showed within 18 minutes he wrote down a feeling of well-being and some dryness of the nose. He recorded his blood pressure throughout the day, but the only other note he made was rather sleepless night. Mind seemed to run from one subject to another. Some sources indicate he also went to a dinner party that evening after work and felt unusually witty. And I remember this myself, being the life of the party on Adderall. Or at least thinking I was. Somewhere I saw it written that he found something that didn't cure anything, but made patients feel better. I want to say that again for everybody. It didn't cure anything, but made patients feel better. Just two quick notes. ADHD was not on anyone's radar, and treatments are not cures. Alls didn't know how to market a drug. SmithKline French had a good idea. They partnered and had a complicated relationship, and to sum it up, after it's long and boring and had to do a lot of money, I'll just say this. They worked together. It was tested in all manner of ways. The pharmaceutical companies kind of just sent it out to other doctors and had them play with it and report back to what they found. One hospital group even gave it to their staff to observe the improvement in their ability to run a hospital on amphetamines, and the staff reported that everybody was on point. Med students, are you watching this video? Comments. Adderall, med school, hospitals? Let me know. After All's discovery, the drug was tested with asthmatics, as intended. A patient was given 20 milligrams orally, and they were still wheezing, but they did feel euphoric. Nonetheless, for a period of time, amphetamine was sold over the counter as Benzedrine inhalers for asthma and cold symptoms. Some people would break these inhalers open, take out the gauze paper containing the amphetamine and put it in their coffee, and they would drink it and play saxophone and trumpet, and they created bebop jazz and the beatnik writing culture. It was prescribed for many, many things. It kept narcoleptics awake, it was a cardiovascular stimulant, it was prescribed to relieve menstrual pain, and even something that they called psychogenetic tiredness. It was clearly powerful, but manufacturers were somewhat dumbfounded as to what it was meant to cure. Sociologist Rain Voss was heard saying that amphetamine was a drug looking for a disease. In 1936, researchers at the University of Minnesota distributed pills to student volunteers to examine the psychological effects. The students who volunteered realized that amphetamines helped them burn midnight oil and study harder. One child psychologist, Charles Bradley, gave amphetamines to the children in his child psych ward, the first psych ward for children. Charles Bradley was an American psychiatrist who made significant contributions to the understanding and treatment of attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, ADHD. He is sometimes referred to as the father of ADHD, a name given to a lot of people, honestly, due to his pioneering work in the field. In 1937, he was working with a group of children who were described as hyperactive and easily distracted. Bradley observed that these children had difficulty paying attention, following instructions, and controlling their impulses. While experimenting with amphetamines, he noted that these kids behaved better. They were paying attention, they were less impulsive, and more keen toward academics. He published a 1937 paper titled The Behavior of Children Receiving Benzedrine, which is considered a landmark study in the field of ADHD. His work laid the foundation for the use of stimulant medications such as Ritalin and Adderall. This note about children was basically put aside for a while, but came in clutch several decades later. In 1938, the first full year of advertising for Benzedrine, sales jumped from 95,000 to 175,000. The next year, thanks in part to more ads targeting depression, that number nearly doubled to 300,000. Of course, in present day, the industry now generates several capital B billion dollars every year. Several clinical studies have shown that amphetamines had little effect on severe depression, anxiety, or schizophrenia despite being prescribed for it. In fact, it often exacerbated anxiety and schizophrenia, and over time, a specific condition was noted called amphetamine-induced psychosis. You can take this pill, and you can feel so good. You can get so used to this pill that when you stop, you find yourself sadder or less productive or more of whatever the opposite reason you took it in the first place is, and you end up running back to the amphetamine as it has become a place for safety for you. When people talk about how the upside of mania feels so good, I think I know what they're talking about, because at least it did for me. A lot was happening in the 30s and 40s, and amphetamine played a huge role in it. There was a literal war going on. Rather, a world war, the Second World War, and holy shit was World War II a crazy event. British and American militaries had begun their own retrospective chemical investigations, both eventually settling on Benzedrine to combat fatigue and boost morale. The drug proved especially popular amongst pilots and air crews who had long, difficult missions of bomb dropping. By 1943, a package of Benzedrine pills had its place in the emergency kit of every American bomber pilot. Nazis, on the other hand, gave their soldiers meth amphetamines, and meth amphetamines produced similar results. Ironically, the accompanying recklessness along with worries about the addiction quickly led Germans to discourage its use in the field, as American and British forces, however, used the amphetamine throughout the war for its effect on mood and morale, and it kept up with a, quote, fighting spirit. This is like when you need King Kong to defeat Godzilla. You know, we each had our monsters that had to fight one another. The whole war was drug-induced. Hitler himself was all about these uppers, and he had injections of the stuff. There's a whole book about the drugs involved in World War II, which I would like to read, called Blitz. Amphetamines were truly legitimized into the culture after World War II. After the war, a surplus of amphetamines was redistributed into the burgeoning industry of psychiatry, referred to as psychosomatic medicine at that time. SmithKline French had considered marketing the drug as a study aid, but was discouraged from doing so after an article was published in the New York Times criticizing the amphetamine, referring to it as high-octane brain fuel. Amphetamine was never officially marketed as a study aid, but its use as one had been occurring since its inception and remains today. Anyone who has been to college will tell you. Benzedrine tablets were advertised for their striking effect upon mood, such as a sense of increased energy, mental alertness, and capacity for work. And one could infer that clinical depression was created for amphetamines. I could be wrong, okay? I could be wrong. It was prescribed for many reasons. Amphetamine can help you lose weight, so it became a diet drug. And amphetamine can help you stay awake, so it was a wakefulness aid. Amphetamine can make you happy, so it was an antidepressant. Amphetamines can make you productive and effective. ADHD. If life gives the pharmaceutical company lemons, they make an unsour mouth an illness. Ultimately, it was depression that stuck, championing the amphetamine's ability to induce feelings of well-being. It was prescribed for mild depression. Mild depression was described as 1. Apathy, discouragement, and undue pessimism. 2. Subjective difficulty in thinking and concentrating and in initiating and accomplishing usual tasks. 3. Subjective feelings of weakness and exhaustion. And 4. Hypochondriac. Undue preoccupation with vague somatic complaints such as palpitation or gastrointestinal disorders that may have no organic basis. They gave hypochondriacs medicine? That's gaslighting. Pills were advertised to treat depression of the elderly and depression related to chronic pain. SmithKline French, the manufacturers of the medication, were encouraging doctors to see depression as broadly and as often as possible. They weren't exactly inventing depression here, but they were aggressively and actively marketing a remedy for it. They were planting it into the mind of every modern American susceptible to advertising that the solution to any unhappiness would be found in a prescription. It was as if being unhappy was out of your control, and better living through chemistry was the only option to feel better when feeling sad or discouraged or confused or irritated or worried about gastrointestinal problems. At the end of the 50s, however, the MAOI and tricyclic antidepressants stepped in to accompany the amphetamine in this effort to combat depression through chemicals. Despite these new medications, many doctors and patients still preferred using amphetamines to fight depression. Abraham Myerson was an American neurologist, psychiatrist, and researcher who made significant contributions to the field of psychiatry, particularly in the area of mental disorders, heredity, and the effects of amphetamine. He discovered that while amphetamines help with depression, it could raise anxiety, so he recommended amphetamine to be taken along with barbiturate sedatives, making a hybrid drug called Dexamol, a blend of dextroamphetamine and amobarbital. Amobarbital, which has the interesting off-label use as a truth serum and was used recreationally and referred to as blues. And I suppose one could compare the Dexamol mixture as to taking Xanax and Adderall in a single pill. The marketing approach for Dexamol was that it helped with everyday mental and emotional distress, weight loss, and also for people who were using amphetamines but experiencing unpleasant side effects, much like ads you may see on Instagram for a product called Stasis. Uppers and downers, man. Either way, blood flows. There was an amphetamine mixture called Obitrol that was prescribed as a weight loss drug. Weight loss doctors were a big thing, and they would just give them out without prescription. Andy Warhol apparently liked Obitrol, which makes sense. A lot of people think that Mother's Little Helper was Valium, but your mom had two helpers. Amphetamine was there as well. There were more amphetamines consumed than Valiums, and this goes overlooked because while Valium was prescribed for anxiety, amphetamines were prescribed for depression and weight loss. But the weight loss doctors did not prescribe it. They just gave it to you. So there was a consumption of amphetamines happening necessarily without prescriptions and data logging. The doctors actually ordered them themselves and had them in bulk in their office and were able to mark them up to their pleasure and take it to the bank. Good thing nothing like that is happening now. That seems too good to be true to lose weight, but may have unforeseen consequences. Even though these amphetamines were prescribed for weight loss, the psychotropic effects of amphetamines was identical whether you took it for depression or for weight loss. Eventually, amphetamines became the spike in the punch of the flower children that turned the bliss, peace, and love of the 60s into manic, chemically induced brain rot, as the dream of the wonder drug became a living nightmare for many whose lives were destroyed in it, in what was called the speed freak epidemic. If you've ever heard of anyone refer to a drug called speed as speed, just know that speed was amphetamine. It was the same chemical. It wasn't different. The only difference was there isn't a difference. Adderall is just modern industrial speed. It had been observed in the 40s and 50s with the narcoleptics that psychotic episodes emerged, and perhaps they believed the meds were unmasking latent schizophrenia or psychotic issues, when in fact they were creating them. However, according to Philip Connell's definitive 1958 study of 48 cases, amphetamine psychosis could happen to anyone who took enough amphetamines for long enough. It was a cumulative effect over time. Even though users took more than the medical dosage at the time of their psychotic episodes, they almost always began with prescriptions. They weren't drug seekers in the beginning. Amphetamine was a gateway drug, and your doctors gives you your first hit. The good news about almost all the patients is that they reverted after a few weeks, proving that the condition was more or less a temporary drug-induced manic state. Depression, weight loss, getting old, being bored, needing to stay awake, flying bomber planes, having a stuffy nose are all viable reasons before 1970 to take amphetamines. It was too easy to get, and people started losing their minds. There was that term. It's a meme of the 60s. They called people who took too many amphetamines speed freaks. Hey, what if everybody who was called a speed freak back then was just an undiagnosed neurodivergent trying to self-medicate? Either way, it had apparently gone too far. Hippies out there were having unprotected sex on LSD while directing feature-length films on 72mm film. Culture was unwinding itself through psychedelic stimulants, opiates, alcohol, marijuana, Valium, Quaaludes, and look what it did to our precious boomers. Pandora's box of bugs appeared empty. We were tapping it out, getting them all out at this point, and it remains unclosable today. There were only more substances to create and more reasons to distribute them. Public opinions shifting against amphetamine with the speed freak stories ended up with the FDA tightening restrictions, required more stringent record keeping by the pharmaceutical industry, and by 1971 the Omnibus Controlled Substances Act declared amphetamines a Schedule II controlled substance, defined as having high potential for abuse and dependence, but with accepted medical uses. Once a wonder drug was now categorized alongside cocaine, morphine, and opium, and doctors could no longer prescribe it for depression or obesity, and all the other stuff. Really only narcolepsy. Amphetamine was now a controlled substance, and before that you could say it was out of control. So again, amphetamine found itself as a drug without a disease. Now, did ADHD need amphetamines, or did amphetamines need ADHD? This chicken or egg conversation is theoretical in nature, and basically, if you are supportive ADHD meds, typically if you're on them, you say that ADHD has always existed under many different names, and it wasn't until the publishing of the DSM-3 in 1980 that we finally were able to give this behavior, this personality, this experience, a name. And if you don't support medication, you might be someone who believes that ADHD was created as a vehicle for amphetamine distribution, and medical research was being funded at the time by the pharmaceutical company to generate ADHD as a sign of overlording corporate greed and mind control, or something like that. I don't know. Saying that ADHD was created to redistribute a surplus amphetamines is considered a conspiracy theory. So I'm not saying that. ADHD symptoms appear to be more or less the inverse of amphetamine side effect, so it really is kind of the perfect ailment for this seemingly perfect drug to handle it. So what do you think came first, ADHD or its treatment? There are resources to support either argument, and people tend to support their own biases, so I'm not really going to say anything about whether or not you should take these meds in this video. But I personally believe the pharmaceutical companies are not our friends, and if we are in perfect health, we are useless to them. For the sake of transparency, writing this script made me miss amphetamines several times. But I won't take them, because I'm an addict, and a little part of me always kinda wants to do them. Quitting doesn't mean you don't want to do them anymore. It means you're choosing not to do the thing that you want to do because you are aware of its consequences. And you know, making this video was hard work. And I know things like this would be smoother and faster experiences if I was on amphetamines. But I take pride in getting this kind of stuff done without medication. And I'm grateful for the handful of people who appreciate what I create. Thank you. Anyways. The pharmaceutical company started funding research that picked up where Charles Bradley left off, and a really strong case was made for mostly young boys who were having a hard time managing the expectations of their teachers in the classroom, had a disorder that was conveniently treatable with the medication that was deemed unsafe for depressed adults and people trying to lose weight. Methylphenidate, also known as Ritalin, joined the party as well. And I should really do a video about Ritalin, because I kind of focus. But anyways, these two drugs, amphetamine and methylphenidate, are kind of like the founding fathers of child psychiatry. Dexedrine was hugely prescribed for children with ADHD, and psychiatrists emphasized the importance of behavioral therapies and environmental modifications to go along with medications. But which one's easier? By 1987, the American Academy of Pediatrics published a report called Medication for Children with an Attention Deficit Disorder, offering guidance on the use of stimulants, including dexedrine, for the treatment of ADHD. Dexedrine is an amphetamine. In 1994, the DSM-4 was published, dividing ADHD into 3 categories: inattentive, hyperactive, and combined. In 1996, someone with 2 thumbs and a YouTube channel was diagnosed ADHD inattentive and put on Dexedrine when they were in 2nd grade and took them for a while until becoming a bona fide Adderall user in 2005. In 1996, Richwood Pharmaceuticals introduced Adderall, a combination of amphetamine and dextroamphetamine as a treatment for ADHD. The medication quickly gained popularity due to its effectiveness in managing symptoms of ADHD. During the COVID-19 pandemic, there was a significant increase in prescription stimulant fills, particularly among young adults aged 25 to 44 years old. This led to a giant overprescription of young adult demographic via telehealth. If you want to read about that, read the article I wrote about the Dun ADHD arrests on Substack. Link is down there. Adderall is hugely popular, and criticism of its overuse is easily written off as ableist, and that is far from my intention. I do not wish to shame anyone who takes it. I used to take it, and I used to love it. I think it's important that we understand everything we can about a drug before we take it every day. I experience a lot of pain from my Adderall withdrawal, and I don't want anyone else to have to experience the same pain I did. And if they're experiencing it, I want to supply strategy, wisdom, and tools, and the knowledge that they're not alone. We watch TikToks, Instagram Reels, and even YouTube Shorts for fast, quick hits of dopamine. This ends up priming our attention span to where it seeks novel stimulation every few seconds. I have on several occasions totally abstained from scrolling apps, and my ADHD always gets better. If you're online and have ADHD stuff in your algorithm, eventually something comes up and asks you if you're having a hard time paying attention, or if you do X, Y, or Z quirky thing. And did we know that that's actually a symptom of ADHD, right? Then more videos like this start showing up on your feed. And all of a sudden, there's a scientific name for being weird, different, quirky, distractible, impulsive, talkative, sensitive, or creative. And a lot of these people with ADHD are funny and good-looking, and they're encouraging you to get diagnosed. You start to interact with their posts, and their ideas start to stick. You start to consider that maybe the reason things haven't been working out for you is because you might have ADHD, and you're so good at masking it, you never got tapped for diagnosis. You're shown hundreds of advertisements for ADHD telehealth services, and eventually you click through, and you end up getting an ADHD diagnosis over the video phone, and then you find yourself the proud owner of your very own bottle of amphetamines. Thanks so much for watching. I hope this was educational, fun, or whatever. Please click all the buttons on this page to see what happens when you do interact, and let's talk. And if you want to read my Adderall memoir, Hocus Focus, Coming of Age with ADD and Its Medicines, check it out. I keep changing the cover. I swear it's going to stick soon. I'm giving away 1,000 digital copies, and so far I have 993 left, so hurry up and click the link in my bio and subscribe to my Substack and get the free book, and then unsubscribe if you want. I don't care. The book is free. You could seriously read one chapter, you could skim through it and never look at it again. It's so non-committal. You can skip reading it and go to my Goodreads or Amazon page and, just rate it without reading, like Matt did. Thanks a lot, Matt. Let me know if you want to see more videos like this one. I really don't know where my YouTube channel is going. I've been doing this for quite a while, but I know I'm trying to make a video every other week or so. There are really a lot more topics I would like to explore and a lot of things I'd like to create. So, thanks, and I hope you're doing well. Okay, bye.